Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our distinguished panel. We've touched on a lot of important issues. Let me start with a little bit of a detailed question for Mr. Smith from Microsoft. Uh, you touched upon this. It strikes me that we have a gap in our authorities for detecting and dealing with cyber attacks, in that the CIA and the NSA are restricted from operating within the borders of the United States, and yet the attacks like SolarWinds and more, our enemies are getting more sophisticated about using servers within the United States. It leaves the FBI as sort of the de facto only cyber defense. Am I correct that that's something that we really need to look at? We don't want to be spying on our own citizens. On the other hand, we don't want to leave ourselves defenseless. Brad, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, Senator, I think it's a really important question. And I think the first question for the Congress and the executive branch is, what part of the government do we want to have assume responsibility for what I'll call the aggregation of threat intelligence domestically? Is it CISA? Is it the FBI? Is it somebody else? You know, the FBI obviously is principally responsible for law enforcement, which means it can work with the DOJ, it can use its subpoena power, but you know, it then needs to protect the confidentiality of information to investigate a crime. And what we're really talking about here is threat intelligence information that needs to be shared rapidly, oftentimes immediately, with the other parts of government. So I think this is a key question. What part of the government should do it? What should the process be for collecting it and for sharing it?
Great, thank you. Mr. Schmidt, an additional question on a different area, and you've really touched upon it today. Industrial policy has a bad name in this country, but that's really what China is engaged in. And you mentioned we used to do a lot more R&D. We need to establish priorities. We need to bring semiconductor manufacturing home. Are we really talking about some kind of at least a more pragmatic and planned attack on maintaining the technological edge? Is it industrial policy 2.0?
I hate to, Senator, I hate to say, yes, it's industrial policy, but can we not call it that? I think it's, what would be useful would be to say, there's a set of things that have to happen in America to maintain leadership globally in the important areas. And remember, these are the technologies that drive all of our economic output, our global presence, and so forth. And we need to do whatever it takes. I think in many cases, with a little bit of focus, with a list, with leadership from the White House, leadership from here, a set of gatherings and so forth, we can agree on what to do. And it's not as much the money as it is getting all the forces aligned. What I learned in working on your AI report is there's plenty of people doing a lot of things, and they're somewhat discontinuous. And getting them unified around 5 or 6 or 7 activities would be very helpful. In particular, we've highlighted, Senator Cotton and others have highlighted this question about semiconductors. That's a key issue. How are we going to solve that problem? Let's get some people in a room. Let's try to figure out what is the fastest path. If they cost $50 billion and it works, then maybe that's the right trade-off, but I'd like to have that debate.
Thank you. One final question, again for Brad Smith. I went to a defense policy conference in Singapore 3 or 4 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and met with a dozen or so officials of a variety of Asian nations. I came away from that with the conclusion that we have allies and China has customers, and that most of those countries wanted to work with us, but they were always looking over their shoulder at China. In terms of cyber defense, in terms of national defense, in terms of technological innovation, it seems to me that allies are one of the most important assets that we have that really most other countries, and particularly our adversaries, don't have. Your thoughts?
No, I think that's very well put. One of my favorite publications every year is the January edition of The Economist. It's assessment of the world's democracies by the Economist Intelligence Unit. This year, it says that there are 75 democracies in the world. They account for 49.4% of the world's population, roughly half the world's people. And what it also notes this year is that democracy is growing in a number of important countries in Asia. And I think it's a powerful reminder for all of us that there is an alliance of the world's democracies that we need to nurture as a nation, that we need to invest in and support as a technology sector. And when we do that well, it not only advances the values that we all support in this country, it makes our technology base stronger. When you pull together these countries, you don't even have to pull them all together. Eric was talking about this before, but you get India together with NATO and countries like Japan and Korea and the like, and you pretty quickly get more than 2 billion people. That is a bigger market, obviously, than China.
And it's also a huge aggregation of talent.
Absolutely.
That can be taken advantage of. I'll leave you with a thought from Churchill you can never miss with Churchill. He said, the only thing worse than fighting with your allies is fighting without your allies. Thank you very much, gentlemen.